everyone.
Very nice to see you guys. Hi, Jonathan Frakes, Star Trek.
Action! Shake! Shake! Action!
Return to your quarters.
Action!
It works, though.
All right, children.
Cut. Gentlemen.
Yes!
Cut. It's gonna be great.
Steady.
It might help us, because we're gonna have to... Cut. Print. I thought Insurrection, being my second foray into making movies, actually was shot with more confidence and a little more style, looked better. We were on wonderful locations, but the story wasn't as strong as First Contact. So all the technique and all the use of and we had wonderful the weather for it, and we had beautiful wheat fields that we worked with. A lot of stuff ended up being cut out, but the look of the movie I thought was fabulous.
That, Nancy, very nice.
Very nice. Thank you very much.
Very nice, everyone.
All right.
It's the most challenging part of it, is that you have to find some balance when you're telling a Star Trek story or a Star Wars story or a James Bond story, some balance between the reality that there is a fan base of people who know the history and the mythology of all things Star Trek or all things whatever. And hopefully there's a new audience, an audience of people who are about to be initiated to Star Trek through this movie, through Insurrection, for instance. The balance of the two, you need first of all to honor the idea of all the myth, all the relationships, the way the ship works, where on what deck is 10 forward as opposed to the sick bay, and if you screw that up, the fans will be on you, the anoraks will be on you like a rash. So, you having done your research, and hopefully the archivists and the people who keep track of all those things are doing the research with you or for you, so that you don't screw it up. That's all in place. And the relationships are what they are because we've all played these characters. I mean, we've been together for 15 years, 16 years, something like that. And by the time we did Insurrection, we'd done 182 hours of television and 2 movies prior to that. We did Generations and then First Contact. So we were on our 3rd movie as a family. So the relationships, both on camera and off camera, were pretty detailed, pretty complex, and worked very well.
Action.
Commander, I'm showing 2 sonar...
The odd thing about working as a director and as an actor
18 minutes.
is obviously that on certain days you're calling action and you're wearing a spacesuit and you've got too much mousse in your hair. You got a little bit of makeup on. That alone, that's absurd enough. The advantage of directing and acting on Star Trek is, as I mentioned earlier, we have been together for so many years and our relationships are so complex and intricate and intimate, and there's a great sense of trust on the set, so that when I'm playing Riker and directing a scene that Riker's in, not only do I feel comfortable with the fact that I know my relationship with Marina, with Troy, for instance, or with Patrick, or with Brent, but there are people generally off camera, Patrick, who's a director, LeVar, who's a director, a wonderful DP, Matt Leonetti, whose opinion I trust. And Leonetti had the most subtle of all responses always, which I'd finish a take, and if it was on me, I'd look just subtly over the actor's shoulder, past the operator, and Leonetti would go, oof, like that. Give me one of those, like, I think maybe we should go for another take. It was the gentle version of, I hope you can do better than that. So he was very, very helpful, like a big brother to me.
Action.
Commander, I'm showing 2 sonar ships on an intercept course.
How long till they reach us?
18 minutes.
We won't be able to get a transmission out of here for at least another hour.
They're hailing us.
Tell them our transceiver assembly's down, that we can send messages but not receive them.
I don't think they believe us.
Why not?
Shake.
Photon torpedo. Isn't that a universal greeting when communications are down?
I think it's the universal greeting when you don't like someone.
Full impulse.
Manifolds can't handle full impulse in the patch, Commander.
If
If we don't outrun them, the manifolds will be the only thing left in this ship.
I'll be in engineering.
Red alert! All hands! Battle stations! There it is.
I love doing both. Since I've done a couple of other films where I haven't had to act, I found it almost luxurious to be able to get there in the morning and check your shot sheet and have a cup of coffee with the crew instead of being there an hour before everybody else and thrown into the makeup and hair chairs, which is also nice. The main difference, I'll confide in you, between being an actor and a director is that as an actor, we are pampered. You show up in the morning, someone brings you a cup of coffee. They know exactly what you want for breakfast. They cut the fruit for you. They give you your rye toast. So the hairdresser's very gentle with you. Somebody has the newspaper for you. Somebody brings you the lunch at lunchtime. Somebody puts your clothes out for you. You put your costume on. Somebody's always taking care of you, patting your You're so pampered as an actor, which you realize only after you go on and do something else. As a director, you get your own coffee generally, and all you're doing is answering questions, and nobody cares about how you look. So it's different.
Come in. Hi.
You got a minute?
Sure.
I need some counseling.
Well, there's a first time for everything.
So what? Do I lie down or what?
Well, whatever makes you comfortable, but this isn't one of the usual therapeutic postures.
The actors and the crew, I think, because I was the first guy in the cast to get a directing slot, they were just loaded for bear. I mean, it was merciless, because it's always merciless on our set. Nothing is sacred. No one is sacred. And when I was given this opportunity, they were really shameless in their behavior, or lack thereof. So the same thing came back to haunt Patrick when he directed, and LeVar when he directed, and it's been that way ever since. Because of the camaraderie, there's an incredible lack of respect that we show for each other, which reflects itself in a really comfortable, jocular, silly working atmosphere.
Rerouting the transport grid to avoid detection was wise, sir. However, the transporter is rarely used after 0200 hours.
A wonderful scene where Patrick straps on his leather jacket and steals the gun and goes down and is about to abandon ship. And he knew he looked hot. He was so glad to be out of costume, and the rest of us are all lined up pleading with him to stay. And it was a classic directly out of Magnificent Seven, where he had decided that he could go alone against the world, and all of us were the voice of reason over his shoulder. And he loved it, we loved it, and it had a strange sense of, it reminded a lot of us of other things that Picard had done during the series, but this was sort of the quintessential version of it, the expanded version of it. And I just remember the scene, because we staged it where we all walked down a ramp. It was very sort of Greek. We were the chorus, and we descended a ramp, and Patrick was down center with his gun and his leathers, and it had an epic, wonderfully directed, wonderfully staged scene.
Taking the captain's yacht out for a spin?
7 metric tons of ultrinium explosives, 8 tetryon pulse launchers, and 10 isomagnetic disintegrators.
Looks like you're planning on doing some hunting.
Return to your quarters. That's an order.
No uniform, no orders.
Captain, how could I look at another sunrise knowing what my sight cost these people?
I feel obliged to point out that the environmental anomalies may have stimulated certain rebellious instincts common to youth, which could affect everyone's judgment. Except mine, of course.
Okay, Data, what do you think we should do?
Saddle up. Lock and load.
They won't begin the procedure.
Yeah, there's our captain, yeah.
I'm sorry, I gotta go change my diapers.
There was a wonderful gambling pool taken on whether or not Brent Spiner, who plays Data, would in fact walk into this frozen lake.
I don't think I can do this, Jerry, without actually seeing Brent go in the water. I'm not really sure I can find the reaction.
It was really bitter, bitter cold. And the character has to walk down into the lake and obviously he's going to do something to the invisible ship beneath. And Brento, who is not afraid to let his stuntman do work for him, as I'm not either. We're not the kind of actors, say proudly, we always do our own stunts. We both have reached middle age and are aware that there are guys getting paid perfectly good money to do this for us. Brent, I said, is there any way that I can get you just to go down a little bit into the water so that I can see that it's actually you and I can be getting close on you? And because he's a friend and he's a mensch, he agreed to do it. And they put on a wetsuit underneath his costume, and they kept him warm and bundled him up and put heat lamps in front of him and generally coddled him as actors are always coddled. And the morning came, and Patrick and I said, he's not going to go into the water. He's a chicken. He's not going to go in there. And God bless him, he went all the way into the water, underneath, head underwater, and I covered it from all kinds of angles. And in the final cut of the movie, you never see that it's Brent going. It could have been you or me going into the water. But the truth is, he did it, and God bless him.
All right.
I'm ready for everything.
What about the front part? Should I stay just as simple as it is now?
Yeah, and also the timing is great. You guys have worked this out. The timing at the front end is lovely. The hand and No, I don't think you need to. I think you're
because yesterday I was laying some more stuff on it. It didn't seem like too much.
Yeah, I think what you're doing now is pretty clear. And F. Murray Abraham, who's a wonderful, dynamic, wild-eyed actor, whose work I think everyone knows, was the leader of this clan of people called the Sona, who had aged so miserably that their skin cracked and was being stretched across their faces, and he was trying to have these bizarre 24th century facelifts which would rekindle his youth, and he played it to the hilt. So the makeover chamber where we decided we'd have sort of Bond girls do his facelifts for him, it just became more and more bizarre as Berman and I added to the absurdity of the concept of this man having skin stretched across his face by these beautiful multinational women with prods and horrible tools of destruction that. And it really became absurd, and it had a Frankenstein element to it that I really actually like that part of the movie as much as anything in the movie.
Artem, do you remember where you were on the day of lightning when the artificial life form appeared to us?
In the hills by the dam.
Can you show us?
Oh, how annoying was that CG pet. Michael Welch, who played this young boy in the film that befriended Data, had a pet that he took with him, and we had to obviously find shots that this pet could be animated into his hand or put into his pocket, and short of freezing the frame, freezing hundreds of extras. I mean, this had to be in lines of people who are running up hills and exterior shots and losing light and all the business that goes with that. So what we ended up doing was, in post-production, we found frames that we could believe perhaps the pet might be worked into. After all these plans we had in pre-production of, what we'll do is we'll frame it in such a way so that when we see his hand, we'll be able to. And it was working with a kid, working with an animal that wasn't even real, working with computer-generated artists, and losing light. All of it's a perfect example of the best laid plans. That's what the CG pet was.
Artem, what are you doing? Come.
It reminds me of one of the gaffers. The guy who does lights was asked, when you're in a cave, we did some stuff in a cave in this movie, they say, where do the lights come from if we're underground in this cave? And he just, without missing a beat, said, same place as the music does. Just one of my favorite retorts now in movie making. The same place as the music, he says. Trust us.
You're looking well, Jean-Luc. Rested.
I won't let you move them, Admiral. I will take this to the Federation Council.
I'm acting on orders from the Federation Council.
How can there be an order to abandon the Prime Directive?
Prime Directive doesn't apply. These people are not indigenous to this planet. They were never meant to be immortal. We'll simply be restoring them to their natural evolution.
Who the hell are we to determine the next course of evolution for this people?
Jean-Luc, there are 600 people down there. We'll be able to use the regenerative properties of this radiation to help billions.
With all things Star Trek, there's always a morality play at the core or at the end of all Star Trek stories. In Insurrection, I think the moral, if you will, is that you cannot hold on to your youth, no matter how much money or how much power, and nor should you. That we are only here for a certain amount of time, and in that time we should enjoy each day as it passes. And as always in Star Trek, and I hope in life, the ethics and the morals are against a corrupt lifestyle, against racism, which is rampant in this film. The anti-racism message, I think, is great. Anti-sexism is a very important theme. And generally the idea that, as with all things Star Trek, the prime directive of not interfering in others' lives sort of echoes the golden rule, which is the way most of us were brought up, which is, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And it always comes back to that on Star Trek.
Energize.
For some reason, it's one of those casts, and I know from having guested on other television shows, it's not always the case. It's one of those casts that actually, as cornball and Pollyanna as it does sound, does work as a family. I mean, we've all been at each other's weddings and stood up at each other's weddings and godfathered each other's kids and been through each other's traumas and still speak weekly. So it's very special. And I get, without getting too emotional and too cornball about it, I think we all value each other as our closest friends, and I think that's caught on film, and I think it's one of the reasons that Star Trek Next Generation, anyway, has been so successful, because the camera somehow sees that these people like each other, not only these characters. And I really believe that that's true.
Over a period of 12 years that I've been with Star Trek, the number of characters probably run into the hundreds that we've created for the show. The number of actual characters made up would be in the thousands, because many times there will be 15 or 20 of one particular race. You can imagine how many aliens that we've incorporated on a weekly basis, a monthly basis.
The Federation ship has been disabled.
Separation in 20 seconds.
What is that?
I don't know. Systems don't seem affected.
Separation in 10 seconds.
I find most of the inspiration for the characters from Earth. It's amazing the areas that we're not familiar with. I find more of it now being exposed through a lot of the cable television that's on, where they've made a special show on microbes, or visiting the jungles in Vietnam where they just turn up a new deer or something. I found that there's so much here on Earth that people are familiar with and aren't familiar with. I usually pull something, whether it's from an insect a fish, a bird, a mammal, a dinosaur bone. There's always a shred of something in all our aliens that people are familiar with.
I'm one of the ship's officers, Tarlac. It's a Tarlac race. We've got 3 races on board here. I am the Tarlac, they are the Eloran, the fellows with the big funny cone heads, and then the stretched faces are the Sona.
I often combine the looks of different animals or different insects, or an insect with a mammal or something, and it's like being able to put scales with soft fuzzy fur. You know, you think you're looking at something totally bizarre, and who knows, it may be out there. We don't know. One time somebody said that if they ever got into outer space and found an alien out there, it'd probably look like something we've already done in Star Trek, because we have done so much.
Eugene Jeffor, Regent Cusack. Welcome aboard the Enterprise.
Captain Picard, may I welcome you in the time-honored tradition of my people. We are so honored to be accepted within the Great Federation family.
We have a dance later, I believe.
I look forward to it.
We have one race of small people, and they have rather large, long ears and little pudgy. Maybe when we're at a reception where we find a lot of our regular Star Trek aliens that people are familiar with along the way.
In this particular case, I had an idea for an alien. We made a mold on it, and it sort of sat around. Mike said, eventually we'll use it for something when it is appropriate. And it worked out that this particular head had a good look for this particular character.
We have a blue alien in there, and it's a Bolian.
Captain, Hars Adislo, we met at the Nelbeto conference last year. Did you ever have a chance to read my paper on thermionic transconductance?
Would you excuse me?
And they are very familiar. In fact, it goes all the way back to Next Generation, where we had our first one, and then we kind of like toyed with them early on in Deep Space, and they've become standard characters in Deep Space, and we've used them in the last 3 movies as officers on the bridges of the ship. It's a fun makeup because they're totally bald and their heads split in 2.
Well, I'm a Bolian. I'm a scientist. The Bolians are all blue, and they got a dark blue stripe all the way down around the cranium, around the skull. It's true. Bolians they're born to be blue. They're just they're not unhappy. They're just blue.
I'm going to miss these little flesh-stretching sessions of ours, my dear.
With the Sona, and everything else was kind of like window dressing for them. They were our main focus. And it said in the script that these people had their faces stretched. It wasn't where they have funny noses or anything. They have very tightly stretched skin. Starting in 1970, about 72, I spent a lot of time working with plastic surgeons. I actually scrubbed up and went into surgery with a lot of doctors, and I saw them cutting and sewing up and removing skin, and literally one time there was a woman that was awake while he was doing the whole face, and it took him an extra hour to do her face because he was showing me what to do, and she was awake and she's talking to me with half her face hanging off at the same time, and he gave me a whole lesson in anatomy, pulled the skin up, showed me the muscle structure underneath and everything. So I had a wonderful background to bring to this concept. The main problem is how far do we stretch the skin? Do we go as far as a movie called Brazil, which it was done very comedic, where they pulled so far that you laugh at it. I started to try to do research where maybe this had been done somewhere else, and it was either comedic like Brazil, or you went as far as something like Hellraiser, which is gory, and it's you're not trying to repulse the audience. You want them to look at it and go, gee, it's possible that if a doctor kept pulling the skin, because they reach a point after, say, 3 attempts at doing your skin, that they can't pull anymore. And you've seen this in magazines where women have these very tight faces that have had one too many lifts. We wanted it to go that far and then take it a step further. So in doing that, I made up 10 plaster heads, and because the way the skin stretches is so unique and so different, and everybody has different concept of it, that I gave 10 heads out to 10 top sculptors and had each one of them do me a sculpture and return it. And then I went to Rick Berman, our executive producer. We laid all the heads out and we took a lot of them and said, yeah, look at this little stretch here. This person here has a very good concept of this. This one has this. There were some that weren't close, didn't have anything to offer. So we were able to look at them and go, oh, look at that piece and that piece and that piece. Okay, so now we know what direction we're going to go in with the pulled skin. And this is what we achieved in the movie, is this tautness of if somebody had 10 facelifts, how tight the skin would become, but yet there was still a reality there. I mean, we're able to look, the Sona was a race of people that lived so long, but yet they were falling apart like humans do, that they had to have this implants and the stretching to be able to keep from looking like a wrinkled rhinoceros. And the skin was even held back by staples, and there's a wonderful scene in the movie where they're pulling the skin up and stapling and everything.
I never should have let you talk me into that duck blind in the first place. Your Federation procedures have made this mission 10 times as difficult as it needed to be.
Our procedures were in place to protect the planet's population from unnecessary risk.
Planet's population? 600 people.
It's scary, but it isn't horror and it isn't comedy. There's this whole touch of reality to this particular humanoid race. There's a scene in the movie where there's this body sculpture lab going on where all the Sona go in to be beautified. And it's one of those things where as far as makeup is concerned, we could have stayed there for days shooting, but we didn't. We only spent a day in there going around little different things. We had one man there was a tooth implant being done on him, and they hired a man who literally had no upper teeth, and I made a new plate of teeth for him that had holes in it, and I made the teeth with these little wires and spikes, so in the actual scene you can see his mouth open and they're implanting the tooth right into the mouth. The process an actor would go through to get into a Sona makeup would be they come in the morning. A lot of the time they would wear a hood, so we didn't have to bother with a bald head. But if they didn't have the hood on, there was an entire pre-painted bald head that slipped on first. And then the pieces would start, and there was this puzzle of laying your first set on, which would be like a forehead, under eyes, upper lip, throat, and then you'd come back and you'd lay the other pieces over top of it. And then once they were all applied, and a lot of them were pre-painted, not except for the edges, so then that would save time for the actor in the chair. And then they'd go back through and paint the little edges up on all the individual pieces, and then go back through and start to add more color to be able to airbrush shadows into it and to paint little blood veins, because we wanted the skin not only to be taut but to look very thin. And that also is achieved with the airbrush and all this little hand painting that was done afterwards.
Background.
Admiral Darling will not be joining us for dinner. Deploy the captain. Do you have a problem with that order? I talk to you alone. Deploy the collector.
F. Murray, who was the character Uwafo in the film, is the head Sona, the main one we deal with all the way through. And with a lot of with the background Sona, for saving time, we used combinations of large pieces to put their faces together. With F. Murray, there was probably a dozen individual overlapping pieces of stretched skin. They would actually take in the morning and glue on an area and then stretch it and glue it down. And in a mouth here, glue it down and stretch it and glue it down. So he actually had this tautness to his face along with these individual pieces. And what was so marvelous by doing it that way is that when he stretched it, and he had a way of emoting where he would stretch his neck, and when he would do that, these things would stretch like rubber bands, which had it all been one piece, that wouldn't have worked. I talked with F. Murray about
He's no threat.
his makeup in that he didn't want it to feel like a total mask that he was entombed in. And by doing these individual overlapping pieces, and also by doing it this way, you're able to make them very thin. If it was a whole piece or an entire mask, you'd have this thin thing that you'd be trying to glue on, you get wrinkles in it. By having all these individual pieces, you're able to stretch and pull, literally, as I said, stretch and pull and glue them down. So he had that tautness to the skin. And it was so light, if you probably tried to weigh it, it would weigh, the whole thing might even weigh an ounce.
I'm a body sculpture girl, taking care of this lovely one here.
The Sona had some people working for them, and they wanted to do a humanoid race, and they were going to be very beautiful women. So we didn't want to destroy anything, around this part of the face here. So their makeups were designed away from what we considered the T-zone of the face. Don't touch the lips, nose, and don't touch the eyes. And in trying to get two different races, we took and made basically a Caucasian humanoid race and a black humanoid race. With the Caucasian one, we took and accentuated their foreheads, left the rest of their faces alone, except when we did some tests, we found that it kind of looked like old Star Trek by not touching them in. So we added a little nose piece to the men. This particular race has more of a lion-like look, and since they're mercenaries, they can have this tough look on the guys. With our black humanoid race, the women and the men have, it's almost like a dinosaur head that comes out, and it's so beautifully blended in. The makeup artists I have working on the show are really marvelous, and these people even have fake cheeks on, but it blends into the skin so miraculous that it just, you think these people are all one piece. And then to kind of give it a little bit extra flair, we found a pattern off the side of a python, and that's more or less incorporated into the side of this head. But all the time, the face area on all of them is totally exposed. I mean, it is human.
The way I came up with the look for the Aloran was I really liked this sort of a flare. I started from there. And I thought, what could I use to justify this really nice line from profile? And so I looked through books and saw some Triceratops pictures that sort of had something like that. They flared up, but I figured I could just keep it going down and then use the same shapes in front with the ridge down the middle, two coming from the eye, a dip, a swing, and then a flare out the side. And then I echoed the flare right here into the cheekbone, and then put another little bump in here, so it's sort of a theme that reduces into a human face.
I've got great sculptures here. I've got wonderful people working in the other labs, and on a daily basis I can put together a makeup crew of anywhere from 1 to 25 people that all come in and enjoy what they're doing, and they know that I want the best work out of them, and I'll check things out before they go on the set. All the artists that I bring in here are all top-notch.
We have
art makeup artists that have won Oscars and Emmys and have shared in getting Emmys here with us. And I look for the cream of the crop every day that I hire people to come into work. I look right at the top and hire the best that are available.
Great makeup has gone. I feel lucky to be working on this.
Star Trek to me has been, it's given me the opportunity to do everything I can possibly imagine. I'm still not bored, still not tired, and this is 12 years later. I still get excited about new characters and what we can do and possibilities of things. For me, it's been so fulfilling that when this is over, whether I retire or continue to do a little things or some, do a movie now and then or something, I will have felt fully satisfied, and my makeup cup has been full.
Insurrection was a pleasure to do. A feature motion picture takes between 55 and 65 days usually to shoot, as opposed to a television series that takes 7 days to shoot 1 hour. So even if you expanded that, 14 days to shoot the same amount of footage that you will use in a movie, and the movie takes 65 days to do. So obviously you have a lot more opportunity to make everything absolutely perfect, to try things, throw them out if they don't work, and try something else.
Well, I think of the 3 feature films that we have done with the Next Generation group, this undoubtedly is the biggest. It's also undoubtedly the film with the most number of exteriors. I would say that close to half of this movie has been shot on various locations, which is a whole different experience than being in the comfort and security of sound stages at Paramount.
There were a lot of problems to solve on this picture. It's a monumental picture in some ways. This is probably the most scenery we've built for a single Star Trek motion picture since Star Trek the Motion Picture, when everything was absolutely brand new. This is 18 more sets in this picture than we had in Star Trek First Contact, and there were 37 sets in Star Trek First Contact.
Inside the caves, quickly! Everyone!
We are in hydrothermal caverns, and we're in dry caves and wet caves, and we have 400 people climbing hillsides in various landscapes, starting at a riverside, going across to a lake, through meadows and up mountainsides and into caves and out of caves. And those are just exteriors, and then we have all the ship's interiors. We see Riker's quarters, we see Picard's quarters, we see Troy's office, we see a banquet hall, and obviously the bridge, the sick bay, the transporter room, all the corridors, the engine room that we're sitting in right now, and then repeat all of those things in the Sona ship. In addition to that, we have 3 new shuttles. We have a Sona shuttle, a Federation scout ship, a Federation shuttle, and the captain's yacht. And we've always had a captain's yacht implied in all the starships ever since the original classic television series. There's a little nodule on the bottom of the saucer section that everyone always pointed to and said that's where the captain's yacht is. But we've never actually seen it. And so this time we decided we'd show the fans what the captain's yacht looks like. To have the opportunity to design from the ground up an entire town is, and it's not like a Western town. It's not just like one street with a lot of buildings and a church at the end. You know, it's the bakery, it's the rotunda where you have the marketplace, it's the individuals' houses, it's the house of the mayor, it's the house of the heroine, Anij, it's the monastery on the hill and the chapel across the river. There's the farmyard and the blacksmith shop. It's a tapestry of real life. We started out with a bare piece of ground next to a lake, which looks more like a river than a lake, and we created this entire community.
The village, I have to say, was some of the most fun I've ever had on Star Trek. And we could never figure out what the power source was. So when we had lampposts, we couldn't show electric lights, or glowing crystals, or lamps, or candles, or any of that. So I designed up some bells-shaped things that were hanging on a post, and light was coming out of them. Nobody really knew what the source of the light was. I found a place in Fort MacArthur that this guy made these wonderful 7 and 8 foot tall metal freeform sculptures. So we stashed those in and around the village all the time. And that was just so much fun. It really was.
When I was at the studio, I think doing some meetings about costumes or something,
the production designer, Herman Zimmerman, had shown me a model of the village and talked to me about his research for these people and the Eastern influences. He showed me some drawings from, photographs from Bali and some of the philosophies that he imagined would be sort of integrated to create sort of Baku spirit. And it was inspiring. It was sort of a cross-referencing of a lot of the research I'd done. And I saw this model and I thought, oh my God, I can't wait to see how that is actually physicalized in this setting. And so the day that we arrived, it was like stepping into a world. I mean, this whole world with a river and bridges and really quite beautiful. And it takes you to another place. And as an actress, you can't ask for anything more.
Benefits of having a model crew on the show is to make miniatures of not only the ships but the sets as well. We had two on our show. One of them was Randy Cooper, who used to be a major effects miniature maker and has moved on to do set models and that type of thing. He did a lot of work on the Baku village, as well as another model maker that built the collector ship. And with the work with the miniatures, they can take a tiny camera and a mirror and go through the sets, kind of plan out the angles, plan out the storyboards. It really benefited Ray Harvey, who was doing the boards, and it also benefited the construction crew of what they had to build, what was going to be seen, what wouldn't be seen. And having that really benefited not only the production crew, but also did me in a way where I could see, oh, if I change this, I can change that. And so it adds a lot of perspective to not only the design team, but the overall production.
My favorite thing were the llamas.
Hello. Nothing like a llama on the set.
There's this one llama named Kissy. And need I say more? The name says it all. Kissy is adorable. And they do this thing where they smell your breath is what they like. And so they come right up to your nose, and it's sort of, but it's very funny. And once you get used to it, and you come in the morning, and the llamas are there. And once I happen to have some trail mix, and they like trail mix.
Right, this llama here eating the tree is Kissy, and this cute little llama is Desiree, and they're actually full sisters from two different litters. Yeah, Kissy is about 5 years old, and Desiree is about 3 years old. They're actually very sweet and friendly animals, and it's just a matter of training them to wear the packs and be around all the crowds, the lights, and everything like that. We start them out when they're very young. We travel them so they get used to it all.
What's it like acting with a llama?
I never actually acted with the llama, but it's a lot of fun. I pet them a lot of times. They dye-colored the back gray or something and black.
I've kissed one or two. In fact, have you ever met or kissed Kissy? Kissy the llama?
Kissy the llama.
She's kind of the head llama.
This film, at last count, I think has 288 visual effects shots. Having said that, the two companies who are handling the majority of the shots are Santa Barbara Films, who's doing a lot of the exterior ship shots, who've done some of the television work for us, and VFX Blue Skies, who are doing what we're calling the altered reality scene, and the palm pet, which is this wonderful, charming character that's introduced that the boy plays with, and the holographic ship. It's tedious. I won't pretend it's not. But when the shots are finalized and when they work, they are what trekkers, and a lot of people who go to the movies are waiting for, are those spectacular, how do they do that, or the shots that push you back with the visuals and with the sound into your seat. And they're a big, big part of Star Trek.
The Federation ship has been disabled.
Separation in 20 seconds.
What is that?
I don't know.
In most starships, when we design them, the bridge is the most important element. And there is certainly a very elegant bridge provided for the Sona, who are a glittering people. They like jewels and they like silver and gold and all the precious metals. And they're very Art Deco in a way, if you wanted to give them a design direction.
Report. Phaser blast, origin unknown. Photon torpedoes, brace for impact.
Shake! 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 Warning, outer hull damage, deck 3.
Visual contact.
The Sona bridge has got a lot of silver and a lot of plush materials. The captain's chair isn't as much a chair as it is a couch. It's a huge double-wide settee that is on a turntable so that Rafa, who is the commander of the Sona, can spin around and walk into his tactical room without too much effort.
Action!
Admiral Dowdy will not be joining us for dinner. Deploy the collector. Do you have a problem with that order?
The computers that are on board are linear and hexagonal shapes rather than analog and or digital that we might be familiar with.
Lie down, Admiral. The girls will take 20 years off your face.
The body sculpture studio is the more important set in the interior of the Sona spaceship. It's a facility in which they try to maintain some semblance of youth. Of course, they're succeeding very badly because they're all terribly wrinkled. They've all had one too many facelifts. Some of them have had several too many facelifts. And again, they are serviced by the subjugated races that are their handmaidens, for instance, and they're lovely alien women trying to trowel on makeup to aging Sona females, and there's quite a lot of elaborate medical equipment that they do face stretching and nipping and tucking and liposuction and all of those things that we're familiar with in plastic surgery. Mostly a losing battle.
Separation in 2 minutes.
We built this enormous interior of a collector, the injector collector set. It was interesting because we came back and did a reshoot on it, and the original set was, I don't know, 60 feet high and probably about 40 feet around, and it was a complete structure with solid walls and a lot of lighting in it, and an elevator that moved in and out. And when we had to do the reshoot, we did the reshoot with about a 20-foot section. And the truth of the matter is, hindsight being 20/20, we could have done the entire thing as it finished in the edited version of the picture on that little set that we had built just for a reshoot of a scene. You learn by doing.
280 on take 3, marker.
Stand by, please. Taser nitrogen.
Stop!
Rafa, we're getting too old for this.
After today, that won't be a problem for either of us.
I wanted to do it horizontally and film it as if it were vertical so that we could get more of a sense of weightlessness inside it. And the producers opted for not doing that. It worked fine. It was a difficult set to shoot on because all of those jeopardies that you see with Picard and F. Murray Abraham and the struggle that goes on between them, that all was done with very few stunt people and at some risk to the actors because they were on this set that was pretty dangerous to walk on. No railings, no real safety nets. It worked out fine, but as I say, we could have done it on a very much smaller set had I known any better at the time.
Action!
As an actor, I've always loved going on location. It always seems to me that there's a certain amount of vacationing time about it. It's not always comfortable, it's not always pleasant. But this time, we were blessed with wonderful locations, and I think it's true to say that at least half the film was filmed on location. Very different from the first two.
We were out for 6 or 7 weeks. We were in Thousand Oaks in this gorgeous oak grove in Ventura Farms. Herman Zimmerman built an entire village at Lake Sherwood. We did a couple of shots at the San Gabriel Dam. We then went to Mammoth and shot at Convict Lake, and then above Lake Sabrina in Mammoth. So it was, we were out there.
We all feel very blessed at those times, you know, that we go to these places and they bring along a catering truck and a comfortable trailer, and they pay us for doing it too. We're quite fortunate.
I've worked a lot on stage, which I adore, but you could never have this. You imagine it, and that's part of your job. But to stand here and look at these vistas, it's been really amazing and really exciting.
Someone said that actors act better on location because they have to defeat all the elements. They have to get beyond the sun or the rain or the wind or the natural frustration of being in a hotel and not being able to sleep, or the noise or the waves or the bugs. Whatever elements are really there on location help an actor focus on what he's doing. You're more honest because you are actually standing on the top of a mountain. You're not pretending to stand on top of a mountain. You're standing on top of the mountain.
Captain, Subtitulado Galatine, Sonic Command.
Lieutenant Curtis, Attaché to Admiral Dougherty.
Are you all right?
We've been treated extremely well.
Lake Sherwood is where Herman Zimmerman and his brilliant design team built the Baku village. And we looked through a lot of different architectural references, and what we found that felt appropriate for this sort of new age idyllic society that the Baku were meant to represent was a Indonesian coastal, peaceful, all-natural elements used in the building, earth tone colors. There's a lot of terracotta and beiges, a lot of thatched roofs. You felt like the materials used to build the village had actually come from this mythical Baku land.
The Baku village was an expression of a kind of Balinese temple design that I actually have the magazine at home that Rick Berman handed me one day and said, "What do you think of this idea? Do you think that might be the kind of place?" And of course it was a gorgeous hotel in Bali that we couldn't afford to duplicate, but I was able to extrapolate some of those ideas, and that became the city square, which is round. Wasn't a square at all, but
the most significant challenge about Lake Sherwood and about getting the look right was that we were fighting the weather.
While we were constructing it, it was the rainy season, and when the construction was over, it had already, everything in California had started to go brown. So we had to water it in order to keep it green. So all of that lush vegetation that you think was on that planet year-round was really nip and tuck with either being drowned or being baked in the sun. So we had to both drain it and water it at the same time.
Captain, we have activated the transport inhibitors around the village.
Good. Let's move these people out!
There was a huge battle scene, as you'll see in the film, where the Baku village is bombed and exploded, and we had, I think it was one of those great nights for a director where We had 8 or 10 cameras, and all the stuntmen in LA are working, and things are blowing. I mean, it's one of those nights you dream of. You're blowing up a city, and you're covering it from all angles, and it was, and you're waiting for the sun to set. So everybody's geared up, and there are hundreds of extras, and it was that kind of, it was one of those moments that you'll never, ever forget, because you're just wet with anticipation. It was just great.
Amor.
Amor.
Background!
Background?
Action.
My name is Soja.
Jean-Luc Picard. These are my officers, Dr. Crusher, Counselor Troy.
Troy.
Would you like something to eat?
No. We're here to rescue them.
As you wish, but I would ask you to disarm yourselves. This village is a sanctuary of life.
I suspect that when people see the film, and I'm not kidding, that there will be people who want to know where this village is, where this resort is, and how do we get there. It was, and I've worked with Herman a long time, it was, I think, his greatest achievement to date.
We've seen so many of Herman's great sets, and yet we're still infinitely surprised every time we see another one. I mean, you see this village, and it looks like it's organic to the place.
It was tasty, it was elegant, it was lush, it was all the things that the story needed. The setting was lovely, the architecture was inventive and not derivative of anything specific. It was new. It shows what an artist Herman Zimmerman really is.
The raccoon needs some rest, sir. According to the geoscan, this is the safest area within the next few kilometers.
Very well. We'll take an hour. Have them break out some rations.
Aye, sir.
Ventura Farms was where the wheat was growing so beautifully, and that Leonetti and I kept having this vision that these will be fields of gold, and as the Baku wound their way back to their village, and we had beautiful helicopter shots and crane shots, a lot of which unfortunately have been cut out of the film because they were languid and beautiful and didn't really work in an action-adventure movie. But this was the area that we had to go back to pick up shots, and we had to bring our own greens, because by the time our shooting schedule was over, it looked like the desert after being very, very plush in the beginning.
When you walk along the water, feel free to go on the high road, except obviously for you and Michael, so that we have, I know the single file thing is inevitable, but I'm trying to avoid it as much as I can. When you're walking along there, feel free to clump up, and if we can go any faster, we should as well. Let's try again. Back to one, as they say.
It's also where we did the beautiful scene with Anish and Patrick with the hummingbird and the motion control camera, who dominated this set for a few days, as they are wont to do.
Isolinear tags. The transporters can lock onto them.
We have to find shelter.
There's the cabin at the base of the next hill.
This way.
All the caves were built here on Stage 18, and matter of fact, they were some of the Deep Space Nine caves that we elaborated on.
It's very tense, hot, miserable.
Seymour.
Frightened. Background action.
Another 43 reported taken, sir.
Shake! Cut. Great.
This is all working. We're actually going to climb up the stairs here, and this is going to be all our escape route up there. We're being chased by the bad guys, and we come in here to try and get away from them. It's a very short sequence in the movie, and it's amazing to think they build this whole thing for something that may last a minute.
Dramatically in the last couple of weeks, they've been hunting for this one dramatic location well into the time that we were in principal photography, and all kinds of suggestions had been made. We were even going to leave the country at one time. There'd even been talk of South America. But we finally went to Mammoth Lakes in Northern California, high up there on the eastern flanks of the Sierras.
I had never been up to Mammoth area, and I didn't know all of this existed in the state of California. It's pretty impressive. I'm going to be coming back up here all the time, I think. There's snow on the mountains. There's rocks. You think you're in the desert, and then you turn around and there's skiing out of the hotel. Skiing in, what are we, June? End of June? So, and it's breathtaking. We have to get up here with a helicopter, or it's a very hearty hike up the mountainside. Breathtaking weather. Clear. All of our bottles of cream and stuff go squirting out because of the atmospheric pressure, so you have to be very careful when you're going to put your little lotions.
I was looking at some still photographs only this week of that location with some people who didn't know where we were, and they couldn't believe there was somewhere like that in California. The people thought we were in the Alps.
See, Mark. Check. Action! Boom!
Captain.
Dana! Troy, keep these people moving! Cut!
One of the keys to the locations in this film was to start off in a very beautiful place, a very pastoral and beautiful place, and then for these hundreds of extras that we have to continually climb higher into the mountains. It's an important story point. And we have come just about as high as we can come within the 48 states, and it's quite beautiful. I think El Nino has helped us in terms of having a lot more snow up here than usual.
I expected Julie Andrews to come into the scene at any point. You know, I mean, it was beautiful in Mammoth. I mean, again, there were drawbacks in that we're city folk, and we can't breathe in the mountains, you know. And then doing action, you know, with no oxygen is a challenge.
There was a certain sort of kind of, you know, base camp on the slopes of Everest about our first location. I don't like helicopters, and I try to avoid them wherever possible. And so for me, it was truly expeditionary. I insisted on walking rather than being ferried up to the location by helicopter. And there was also a certain amount of, I guess, of course, showing off about it, you know. But before we left the location, I was at last agreeing to be ferried down by helicopter rather than make the hike back down at the end of the day. But it did lead, it made for dramatic filmmaking, because time and time again, the moment the camera stopped rolling, you know, another helicopter, because I think we had two of them working all the time, ferrying people and equipment up onto the mountain.
The helicopter shuttle was, I thought that was a very efficiently run operation. My hat was off to them. A lot of us wanted to walk because we didn't particularly relish the idea of flying in helicopters. But after spending the day at 10,000 feet, we said, well, maybe the helicopter ride will be fine on the way down.
My name is Glenn Smith, and I'm a helicopter pilot here to support the cast and crew with equipment and personnel movements. We are in the rugged Sierra Nevada mountains at about 9,500 feet above sea level. And it's very rugged terrain, very precarious for carrying equipment and for people even walking. It's very difficult. The altitude makes it difficult for people to take even a few steps without getting winded. And I love it being up here. You couldn't ask for better weather, better scenery, and the people are excellent, great people.
That was pretty terrifying. I had my eyes closed all the way, no view. And I had the best seat in the house right in front.
There was a helicopter that looped, that picked people up at the base camp where we parked the cars. And I think it was 4 or 5 of us at a time could get into the helicopter. The area had to be cleared. The helicopter went up to the mountain, to the location, dropped the 4 or 5 people off, and then went back down to the base camp. And went on for hours in the morning until everybody was up at work. And then lunch was brought up. Nobody left for the day. We were locked onto this mountaintop. We didn't shoot there for long. We were only there for 4 or 5 days. But it was 4 or 5 days that people remember, some fondly, some not so fondly.
How about a passive radiation scan?
Curious. There appear to be strong neutrino emissions coming from the lake.
Convict Lake had a beautiful granite wall on the far side of the lake from where we shot, which we used as a background for the plates of the invisible ship, which was a computer-generated nightmare. Who knew when the script was written that the idea of showing an invisible ship emerging from water would be the challenge it was? I mean, I guess if you think about it, it is invisible, so how are we meant to see it? Are we meant to see it because the water drips off it, and if we see too much of the water, then is it going to be invisible? So this became, as there is at every film, the bugaboo, the part of the movie that we're desperately trying to get right, that we kept sending back to the drawing board, if you know what I mean. We kept looking at scenes and looking at shots that I see the ship in this one, it's supposed to be invisible, the water doesn't look real. It just became that kind of scene.
I think most of the wow element of that was really the CGI work. I did have to build a boat that Picard had to row. Picard and Data and Donna Murphy had to actually physically get on and paddle, and the wind was pretty high that day, so it wasn't an easy job. In order to make it work, I had built 2 boats, and they lashed 2 of them together in order to make it usable in the wind conditions, because it was way too windy for a proa. It had to be a catamaran at least to negotiate the water.
I don't think I can do this, Jerry, without actually seeing Brent go in the water. I'm not really sure I can find the reaction.
Brent Spiner rose to the occasion. The water was allegedly 40 degrees. The water was probably 35 degrees. 5 degrees at that temperature, I'm not sure, is discernible. But he was, God knows, he was pandered to, and his costume had a waterproof suit under it, and we took all the precautions, and there was a heated room there, and there were towels and hot water, and he complained about it up until he had to do it, and then he did it without batting an eye, and asked if we wanted to do it again.
That lake was 42 degrees, and it was up in Mammoth, and all of the water was basically snow melt off, because there was still snow around the edges, and I had to walk into the water and disappear, and I had to do it. Actually, they did. Brian, my stuntman, did it first, and they shot him from a distance going in from the back, and then they brought me in, and basically he did it first so he could tell me what it was going to feel like, and then they brought me in and did close-ups so you could actually see me go under, and in the final analysis, then the final cut, they used the shot of Brian from a distance going in. They never even used me, but that was one of those stunts that I'm rather proud of. It's one of those things, every film we do, I have to do something that a human being shouldn't have to do, at least not a wimp. I mean, stuntman, okay, that's their gig.
Can he breathe underwater?
Data doesn't breathe.
It seems like every picture we do, I have to do something that, a middle-aged man really shouldn't be required to do, and this time it was going into the water.
It was a great moment for him. It was a victory, because we all knew how bloody cold it was. Nobody wanted to go in the water, least of all him. So just doing it was a triumph.
My name is John Eves, and I'm the concept illustrator on Star Trek Insurrection. And we did a series of drawings for the film concerning the spacecraft and the sets and the props. And now we can have a look at some of those illustrations from the show. Insurrection was a very large challenge, mainly because we had a new effects group coming in. We were transforming from actual miniatures to CG work, and so everything had a whole new design sense to it, where with a 3/4 drawing for ILM, that would be basically what they would need, and some rough plans. The CG company that we were using, Santa Barbara, required a lot more drawings, top views, side views, plan views, a lot of other things with it. And it was also, on a mental level, trying to change from what a model couldn't do due to budget to what a computer model could. They could do a lot more motion, a lot more things without the mechanics behind it that you would need for a physical model. The first 3 ships we had to do for the Sona, we had to do Ruafo, which was the main character, his flagship, a battle cruiser, and a collector. The first ship we came up with was Ruafo's main battleship. And for the main architecture of the Sona lifestyle, I chose kind of like yard toys, like horseshoes, boomerangs, badminton birdies. So all of those are kind of the reference of where the ships were going to come from. And I remember the first thing I started doing as I went over to see Jerry Goldsmith's score on First Contact, and they had a big grand piano and was open, and I remember seeing all those strings, and I thought, wouldn't that be a great idea for a ship? And when Insurrection came along, I thought I'll transform those ideas over. And so everything that you'll see in the Sona world has kind of an open piano look, where you'll see a lot of repetitive strings, a lot of repetitive kind of wiring going through the main architecture. And being with Ruafo's ship, you'll see that through the interior of the ship. And this is also the movie where we decided that scales were going to be the very most important aspect to the drawings. The scale of the ships in Insurrection changed drastically throughout the effects part of the film, based on what would be seen with the story and how the scenes would play out. And from that point, we all kind of decided that we need to get a scale set. So we started making drawings that would show those scales. And you'd have everything in comparison to the Enterprise E. And from there, Ruafo's ship was slightly smaller, maybe about the same size as the dish of the Enterprise. There was also a funny thing, because Peter Lorson was our effects supervisor, and when I sent the drawings over, he liked what he saw. He started getting it all approved, and then when we started to do the plan view, he goes, okay, put the engines on this side, make them glow over here, and I go, oh, that's the front of the ship. And so we had this huge kind of discussion on which way the ship was going to fly at that point, and I had drawn everything with a kind of forward fork motion, kind of carried the architecture through it, and Peter liked the opposite view. And so I remember we went all over that drawing to make it go the right direction, carry the right weight, and so that was kind of funny. So after that we started putting arrows on everything too, when they go to the meetings, which way they're initially supposed to go. With the battle cruiser, that was basically designed around a boomerang. It was kind of a forward-reaching boomerang, and in comparison, all the ships kind of had a morph shape to them. Ruafo's ship, if you spread it out, would be the boomerang ship, and if you folded it in, it would be the collector ship. So they kind of had a very similar shape, just in different proportions to be spread out, or vice versa. Everything we did for it was based on kind of a flat plane. So on a forward point of view, everything was kind of very horizontal in the design. For the Sona collector, which was one of the ships that changed scales a lot through the drawing process, from being somewhere from 2 miles long to just barely over 4,000 feet. And in the film, it actually, you can see it from the opening shot, it's about the 4,000 feet, and by the end of the movie, you have the Enterprise strafing it, and it's almost back to the 2-mile length. So it was kind of fun to watch that visually, and if you didn't know, you really wouldn't know. And the effects guys really carried that out well. I think Hunter Grassner came and did giant miniatures for the explosion scenes, in addition to the CG work. The collector ship was based on the badminton birdie. It's almost like an umbrella with the ship inside the center of it. Greg Jean, one of the old model makers from the motion picture, came on. He built a couple study models for it. And the model he built was this gigantic model, probably about this long. And they had all the intricate work on it, and they used that. Santa Barbara used a lot of the models he made for scanning, and did a lot of the work around that. Also with the collector ship, we had giant fans that were going to unfurl from the sides. And the ship was based on a 3-point architecture where you had a top fin and 2 kind of dorsal flanking fins on it. And not to make it look too symmetrical, when the blades opened up, we chose two, and they'd kind of fold out. And the design work on that had to be very critical because towards the end of the film, there's a battle that's taking place inside the ship, and they're in the chamber that kind of goes right through the center of these two fins that open up. So what you're seeing around in the set is the storage area where those blades were conceived. When we were doing the injector designs, originally the ship is basically laid on a horizontal format, and so we were designing the set on that same type of format, where it was going to be a long corridor as opposed to a vertical one. And so we had a model maker come in. He started building all kinds of different versions of this open framework structure. First one was a cylinder with two kind of side cylinders on the side, and you could do all your action crawling through these gantryways and across the framework. As time went on, they figured we'll just go with kind of a gravity situation in the ship where it wouldn't matter which way it was angled, you could still manipulate the set. So they went with a vertical set, which was actually easier to build, actually easier for the cast and crew to work in. And so they built a single cylinder that was all based on framework. A model maker came in, built, like I said, he built many versions of the model, and the final one was actually the simplest one that he had to do. We had another artist come in, Ray Harvey, who came in. He basically storyboarded everything, and he had to redo it every time the model changed. So he wanted doing boards, the same kind of action sequence, based on these different sets over and over and over again. When the prop department started getting their work done, we had another artist come in named Ed Natividad, and he had just come off of Star Wars Episode 1, and he came on and started doing the props, and absolutely brilliant artist. And with just a few strokes, you get not only the prop, but the action of it in the actor's hands, and just brilliant to watch this guy work. I became a big fan immediately, and he did kind of the exterior of the Baku village, what it was going to look like, as well as all the props for the show.
Take cover!
One of the favorite designs I worked on was the Sona Scout ship, and that was kind of based, again, on the boomerang, but more with aggressive angles on it. It was primarily written to be seen at night with just the lights flying by, and they actually did a lot of day shots with it, and kind of the entire film, that was my favorite of the ships that was produced for the show.
Rerouting the transport grid to avoid detection was wise, sir. However, the transporter is rarely used after 0200 hours.
Taking the captain's yacht out for a spin?
First thing we did with the Federation ships is there was a captain's yacht. And what we did with that is we took the bottom of the Enterprise model, and logically it was going to be the little torpedo launcher that you saw primarily in First Contact. And by accident, the seam line around the drawing made a perfect kind of seam for the shuttle without disturbing the torpedo launcher. And so we took a casting from ILM of the bottom of the ship, cut it along that line, and built a yacht on top of that, basically, kind of using kind of a schooner design to it with the traditional nacelles. And so there's two kind of flanking designs on the side that John Goodson had put in the miniature, and they worked excellent for the struts. We just did kind of a hinge motion on them so the nacelles could drop out as the whole yacht would detach from the ship. We had to design an entire interior of what that bay would look like, as well as a loading ramp for where the actors would board the ship. So we did kind of a tail ramp that would drop down the back of the yacht. The actors would walk down and then into the back of the shuttle or the yacht, and then when it would detach, it would break away from there. Everything would be sealed off by airlocks. The ship would drop down and kind of transform into its flying mode with the nacelles extended. And then we did a reverse design for the set that they built. So we had a drop-down ramp, and you could go into the back of the yacht, and you could see the doors were part of the architecture, so they would close to represent the back of the yacht. And we also had new shuttles that we got to design. We kind of based them roughly on an aerodynamic shape, but with the traditional small struts and the nacelles on it, like the older shuttles. Wanted to carry that architecture in a little bit, that it's still old, yet still had a new sense to it with the streamline of the Enterprise E. We wanted to be very specific that these are Enterprise E shuttles. We also had a scout ship for Data, which was kind of based on the Defiant lightly. The producers wanted to see something that followed something of the Federation and Starfleet, and so we kind of based it roughly on the Defiant. It's more of a single-man, two-man ship as opposed to a big fighter like the Defiant is. We use the same kind of color schemes, the bare metal look, and it was actually designed in a way so both ships can interact together.
Prepare the docking clamps.
We have a scene where the shuttle has a magnetic lock and it has to dock onto the ship, so they do this maneuver throughout, and it had to have these really heavy locks that could lock the two ships together while they still had access to ports. And so on both ships we had designed the same type of emergency hatches, which were based on circle hatches like manhole covers. So we had them on the bottom of the shuttle as well as Data Scout ship. And no matter how they wanted to visually put it together, they could dock on top, dock on bottom, depending on where they wanted to do the visual, what would be more exciting in the film. That's kind of how we based the placement of the hatches. One of the extra things we did with the Enterprise E is we had the shuttle bay. This is the first time we got to use the shuttle bay on the back of the saucer. And traditionally we were thinking about using the one on the back of the body, kind of like the old original series. That was take advantage of this big shuttle bay we have on the saucer. And we also have a scene where the warp core gets ejected. So we get to redesign the entire underbelly of the Enterprise E to have this giant warp core eject. And we had designed all the hatches, all the emergency lights, all the plasma vents, everything we needed to get that core out. And budget-wise or time-wise, the shot was never shot. You almost have a verbal description. You see the core out in the briar patch. But design-wise, we'd come up with all these really unique little ways for this core to blow out, kind of based heavily on James Cameron's Aliens, when you have the big hatches open up for the drop ship, and you have all these fantastic caution labels and the red spinning light. So we tried to recreate that type of look that's a very hazardous area on the ship.
Detonate!
One of the big scenes we came up with was there's a pod, and it was a scene that was deleted from the final film, but Ruafo is trapped on the collector when the rings are collected. And the way the scene played, he is in this pod, gets shot out, and kind of goes back in time to almost nothing in the scene. And so we had to design this entire pod that would launch through the center of the ship, escape before it exploded, and eject into the rings. And that one, I think we drew 4 or 5 different versions of it. And it wound up almost just being basically a kind of an angled soda can. And it would eject out of the ship, and you had windows all across the top so you could see kind of the aging transformation that would take place on Ruafo as you could see where you're traveling through the open windows.
Rick Avery, I'm the stunt coordinator on Star Trek 9.
Boom! So it would be best if I'm handing it to this guy right here.
Today, Data is going to save some of the Baku that are trying to escape from these drones that are attacking them. And as they're trying to escape, 3 of these aliens, 1 Sona and 2 Tarlacs, come over a cliff armed and catch them off guard. So Data does a heroic move by offering his weapon to the Sona, and then takes all 3 of these guys out with 1 move, with 1 punch, which knocks them over a cliff, which is a long cliff. It's going to turn out by the time we get done doing computer graphics and opticals and things like that, probably like a 500-600 foot fall.
Action?
Action.
Cut! That was pretty good, wasn't it?
Guys, we'll accomplish that by having these guys go over and do this 30-foot high fall. Then we'll go into the doing a plate shot and having stunt guys imposed on the shot and make the fall look longer. And then we'll go on a stage with green screens and drop the guys with descenders to finish up the last part of the fall. Their roles are the three guys that are going to go over the cliff, and this is my son Brian Avery. His mother won't recognize him. This is Eddie Braun, and this is Joey Box. The first part of this stunt is actually on location at Westlake, at Lake Sherwood, where we've built Baku Village, and this is a cliff just off the side of it. So the first part of this high fall is actually a real high fall into the airbags the old way we did it, with combination of futuristic animation skills of our visual effects crew.
It's real deceiving. Up there, you look at it and you go, oh yeah, that's not a problem at all. It's also hard to get level stuff there, because you might have the board going this way and it looks like it's straight.
We can't see it right now.
Had I not come down here and looked at it from this thing, from up there, oh yeah, I'll make it up there.
So Joe,
and you might anyway.
Let's just figure out
it's just
that
nice
you
to
and,
know.
let's just figure that you and Brian never get any further out than over there, if you can. You want this angle? Yeah, you want this angle right here. Because once you start getting over too far here, you're dealing with this. Yeah. And Eddie, I don't want to get too far the other way. You don't want to get too far the other way. Right in here, yeah. This angle here, which is dead center into your bag, I think. If you just maybe even stay a little to your right, like right of center.
Yeah,
you'll be fine.
Yeah, because
the challenges are that we're working with real rock here. It's kind of convex, I guess you would say, and so it makes the guys have to be on their toes and make sure they clear this rock to get out to the airbags. We have two guys going into one bag, one going into another, so their timing has to be perfect. They've rehearsed it for a day or so, so they're well prepared for that. And then we had to build a stage above this marsh, reeds, and water to make sure that we could put the airbags out here. So it took about a day just to build this stage. It's not so much hard hitting the airbag, it's hitting it properly. They look like they're soft and cushiony, but if you hit them wrong, they'll slap you, and they'll make you know that you hit something. So, but these guys have all done a lot of high falls, so they're acutely aware of how to land in these bags. That's Eddie on the right, there's Joey in the middle, and there's Brian on the left. Brian and Joey on the left are going to be coming off together and going to this bag here on the left. And then Eddie will take his off to the right, and then we have Brian Williams, who's Data's double behind him, and he'll come up into the shot right after we knock him over.
Right. Okay, we're rolling cameras, guys. Waiting for speed.
Speed, set.
Speed. Okay, stand by. 3, 2, 1, go. Eddie, okay? Yes, sir.
Great.
Everybody's okay.
Well, you saw him flying through the air. It looked great.
How was that, Matt? How was that, Stevie?
That was good. That's great.
Yeah? Anything else we can do to fix it?
I don't think so.
That's a day at the office.
It went absolutely perfect. Thank you, God. As long as you have rehearsal time to work on these things, that's the benefit.
Hi, I'm Peter Lauritsen. I was the co-producer on Star Trek Insurrection, and we're going to show you some images of the shuttle chase that was created for the film. We, of course, started with the design of the models. John Eves in the art department created some great new ship designs, the Scout ship and the Federation shuttle. Once we had the designs, the Santa Barbara Studios took those drawings and created 3D models, and that's what we ultimately created for the sequence. These are the storyboards for the sequence that was done. We felt that storyboarding the sequence completely was going to give us the best map to do it efficiently, and we kind of had to move fast with this one because we wanted to see our people through the windows. A lot of times we will play the windows of ships as tinted black, so you don't have to see what's going on inside, because it can get kind of complex in terms of shooting your real actors in mock-up cockpits and have a camera move that integrates with the way the ship is going to maneuver. It gets very tricky to make all those things integrate properly. But in this case, we really wanted to see our people in the cockpits. So we did basically laid out the sequence in an animatic form, which is a very rough stick figure, if you will, version of the ships flying around in a CG environment. From there, we used that as our guide as to what our camera moves were going to be and when we would need to shoot our real actors in mock cockpits to integrate with our CGI ships. Here's a shot where Brent Spiner comes alongside, and they have a look between the windows, and then he moves off. The foreground element of Picard was a simpler situation. It was just a blue screen out the window of the interior of that shuttle set. The other element of Brent Spiner was more difficult in that we had to place him inside a ship that didn't exist and would be created CGI. That required a moving camera with Brent Spiner sitting in a mock-up cockpit and getting the move and his head turn to choreograph properly to integrate with Picard.
You can anticipate tactical strategies. Open all hailing frequencies.
Data, this is Captain Picard. Data, please respond.
If we fire tachyon bursts, it might force him to reset his shield harmonics. When he does, we can beam him out.
Make it so.
Tráilers. Visita mi canal.
Direct hit. He's resetting his shield harmonics.
Beam him out.
He has activated a transport inhibitor.
Prepare to enter the atmosphere. We use the ionospheric boundary to shake him.
Scanners are offline.
Evasive maneuvers heading 140 Mark 31.
One of the things we wanted to do with the sequence was have these ships doing a lot of intricate maneuvers and swoops and spins and things like that, and that was something that would be extremely difficult with motion control model photography. So it was another advantage that we had by creating the ships CGI. Normally we're up in space with these ships and we can create whatever backgrounds we want. In this case, we were coming down into the atmosphere, so we hired a jet, with a camera rig and went up on a semi-stormy day and photographed these clouds, backgrounds, and had to guesstimate the kinds of moves and things that we would want to see in the background of these ships so that it would help sell the CG ships in a real atmosphere. There's one shot in particular that I really like where we are looking down and we're seeing Data in the cockpit of his ship, and we tilt down off of him and we see Picard and Worf sneaking up below him in the other cockpit. So that's where that really paid off, to see our real actors in the cockpits. When the ships go into a spin, going down toward the surface, imagery was Some of it was CGI, but it was all created by referencing the real landscape that we were at. And that was a ranch outside of Santa Barbara in the San Ynez Valley. For that final shot where the ships swoop down and come very close to Earth, and the grass is kicked up into the camera lens, we had a helicopter do a swoop past as if it were these ships. We didn't come as close as them, of course, but it did make the grasses move the right way. And then for that final kick of grass into the lens, that was CG.
His cheek should flame, and his brow should whirl, his bosom should heave, and his heart should glow, and his fist be ever ready for a knockdown blow.
Prepare the doggy claps.
His eye should flash with an inborn fire, his brow with scorn be wrung. He never should bow down to a domineering frown,
or the tang of a tyrant tongue. His heart should stamp,
and his throat should growl.
His hair should curl,
and his face should scowl.
His eyes should flash,
and his breast protrude.
And this should be his customary attitude. His foot should stamp, and his throat should growl. His hair should curl, and his face.
Inertial coupling is exceeding tolerance. If we do not release him, he may destroy both vessels.
I'm not letting go of him.
We must stabilize the damping field.
Reroute emergency power to inertial dampers.
The auto sequencer was damaged by phaser fire.
Transferring controls to manual. Power sequence realigned. Engaging stabilizers.
Damping field established.
Maximum power.
Hi, I'm Peter Lauritsen. I was the co-producer, second unit director on the film, and we're going to talk about the drone sequence. The drones were the way that the Sona were going to take hostages, if you will, from the surface. They're basically computer-controlled drones that fly down and shoot these little tags that will allow the Sona to beam the people to their ships. The drone itself, again, was a John Eaves design that VIFX built both a practical model of for set use and a CG model to do the flying around.
My name is Patrick Denver. I'm the model shop foreman for Blue Sky VIFX, and we do model work and some of the props for the show. This is one of our drones. It's ejected from the spacecraft. This was designed by John Eaves. We worked off drawings and blueprints to manufacture this. It's completely scratch built. So it was a process of about 4 to 6 weeks from paper to the finished product here today. This is the physical kind that we're using here on set, also be complemented by CGs and computer animated ones also. There's several models of this here today. This is the hero. We also have some very crushable ones that the actor's going to demolish later on.
Another kind of complex sequence where we wanted to integrate these drones with the practical environment as much as we could. So when we went out and shot the second unit material, we had to envision all these drones flying around in the air and direct our actors to respond at the right time and so forth. So there was a lot of timing issues when we were shooting the second unit, and had to also be concerned about who specifically was going to get beamed out, because they had to be isolated from the other people in the crowd, or you'd get into some real rotoscoping issues that you didn't want to deal with. In order to integrate those drones into our environment, we went out and shot practical pyro elements on that location, where we would just have pyro boxes on stanchions that would explode on cue, so that when one of our people fired at them, it would feel like when they exploded, they were in that environment. So that really helped tie them into our practical footage. One shot in particular where a drone comes in and Worf swats it out of the air was actually a composite shot. It's integrated so well that it looks like it might have been a practical shot. So the first element was we told Michael Dorn where that drone was going to be, so he would swing in the right place. The camera would pan off of the air onto Worf and he would swing. Then we stepped him out of the scene. In his place, we put a pyro box, which is just a black box with a pyro charge inside it that can be set off by radio control. And then we put those two elements together and then also put a little interactive flare on the actor's face so that it felt like that explosion was right there with him.